Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner-operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to our podcast today. So, if you have been following us, and I hope that you have, you will know that our podcast is designed to kind of critique and analyze a single horror film. Doesn't matter what decade it was from, doesn't matter what subgenre it's from, but me and a special guest will come on and we will discuss and have a conversation about a particular film, whether it's a critique and analysis or just plain conversation. So you never know what you're going to get. That being said, this year we've been trying to delve deep into a lot of the different subgenres of horror, as well as the many different decades. It's something that we didn't do a whole lot of the first year, but the second year, we want to be able to tackle a lot of those horror films out there that you may or may not have heard of. Hoping that you will get a newer appreciation of some of the films that we discuss. Tonight, we are going back, way back to the 1930s to discuss one of Universal Studios' Universal monster films, and that is The Mummy from 1932. And to discuss the film with me today, I have Dave Watkins. We are so glad he's back on the show. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for having me on. We're talking about the Brendan Fraser Mummy movie, right?
No.
1932.
I don't think Brendan Fraser was alive back then, much less starring in that Mummy movie. That will be for another podcast. For this one, we are going back to the one that starred Boris Karloff as Imhotep the Mummy, as well as Ardeth Bay. So I have to ask first, because you and I have discussed some of the Universal Monster movies already in previous podcasts. What are some of your feelings about this film? Because neither you or I were around when this movie was originally released, so we may have different opinions on it now.
Yeah, I've seen this movie several times, and I think every time I see it, I have a different opinion about it.
Okay.
I think it's weird. It's a weird one because I think it is a little bit like Dracula, but it's different in a way. But it's I think that the first time I saw it, I liked it fine, but then this next time I saw it, I was thinking it's too much like Dracula. But then there's some other stuff that make it a lot different. So I think I have a better appreciation for it now than then. So I guess as far as my reaction to this film is a little complicated.
Okay, so this is what I can tell you. I did not grow up watching this film. In fact, I probably wouldn't have watched this film for a very long time had I not taken a class in film school in which I studied a lot of the James Welles films. That introduced me to Boris Karloff, and then I started looking at all the Boris Karloff films out there, because obviously James Welles did Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and The Invisible Man. But two of those films had Boris Karloff, and I was like, who is this guy that I had never heard of? And so from there, I kind of segued into a whole plethora of Boris Karloff films, from The Mummy to Old Dark House to I just took a deep dive because he did so many films that I was appreciative of.
Body Snatcher, right?
Body. With The Mummy, one of the things I really loved about this movie when I first saw it is that I loved the makeup for the Mummy itself. Yeah. Surprisingly, a movie about the Mummy in which the Mummy doesn't really feature a whole lot in.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the thing that's I think if you're watching this for the monster Mummy, now there are I think was it 3 sequels or 4 sequels to this in the Universal? I think there's 4 sequels to it. Yeah, but after this one, it's your more traditional Mummy. Even though the Mummy that just shows up and is just like a mindless mummy and is kills people, kind of usually by demand, like somebody gets him to kill people. But here, this is completely different. This is a mummy, but he starts out as a mummy, like at first, but then they bring him to life, and then he doesn't kill the first guy he sees. He basically takes the scroll that bring people back to life, and he leaves. And it's not his goal is not necessarily to kill people, but he will kill somebody if they get in his way.
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing I liked about this film. You bring up a good point when you say how much it followed. You thought about this in Dracula, and the plot is very similar to that of how Dracula is plotted, which is probably what made it so easy to replicate the Dracula formula for the Mummy. But the thing about this film is the Mummy is kind of doing everything he's doing for love, to bring back his long lost love. So right. It's this understory of like a slight love story, and then towards the end, it becomes this whole thing where he, what's her name? Anaxinamen is resurrected. But she really doesn't want to be killed again.
She's not. He's resurrected. She's reincarnated though.
Yeah, she's reincarnated, but at the end of the movie, her spirit is in the body of his reincarnated version. And then of course, the Ardeth Bay / Imhotep wants to kill her again so that she could be resurrected the proper way, like he was, which is a very complicated plot thing towards the end.
Well, yeah, right. Well, it's very. And that's part of that what makes the movie really good, really. But it's about what's really interesting about it, and we're probably jumping ahead a little bit. I guess we can go back and talk about the other stuff. But this is really the better part of the film. So he's been resurrected, and he's had the same soul. I mean, she has the same soul too, but his soul's kind of been in limbo. He's kind of been there. And he's brought back to the same body, and he's kind of has been there. And on the other hand, she has lived lots of other lives in between her. So it's still the same soul in her body. And Helen's body is just the same soul. Yeah, the same soul's still there, but over time she's experienced different things, and her soul has changed. And she doesn't even she doesn't have the same connection to him that they had back in like 3,700 years ago. So it's a very you ever seen Cloud Atlas? You see that film?
Yes.
It's about reincarnation, and and it's very, I really like that movie a lot. But they have several different actors playing the same soul for different time periods, and the way that soul changes. Even though sometimes I think there might be some parts, especially with Tom Hanks' character, where he's not playing the same soul every time, but how those souls change over time, and like there is a love like thing between two souls, and especially happens throughout the different time periods, and then in the future they kind of connect. But here, unlike these souls are, one soul stays the same, the other one goes forward. So when they get time and when they connect, they're not connected. There's actually another sequence to this film that they shot with the actress, that they shot a bunch of other stuff with her going through different reincarnated time periods. Probably was half the budget of the movie that ended up cutting from the movie.
Yeah, you kind of get that sense with the flashbacks. Yeah. But I didn't know that there was other stuff that was shot that was just cut.
They showed her going through different time periods of her soul, and it really but obviously, if they would have left it in the film, it would have drugged the film out. But it makes it like that. I really sold that idea of the reincarnated, I think.
Yeah.
For that character.
Well, it's one of the more interesting things that divert from what the Dracula story was, and we talked about Dracula much earlier in a different podcast. Yeah. Whereas with this one seems to be a little bit more complicated, especially in terms of the characters and the characters' motivations in this one. Which I actually really loved. I love the fact that it opens with them finding Imhotep's tomb. They didn't find it. They've been there for a while, and then they uncover his the what do they call it?
The scroll of Tarth or something like that.
Yes, they discover that, and of course the one guy I like to reference is Renfield. Yeah, he goes completely crazy after seeing the mummy rise. After he accidentally whispers from it, no less. The mummy awakens, and then the mummy doesn't kill him. He just takes the scroll and walks away.
I think he was almost thinking of the words in his head. They didn't want to have to write it,
Yeah. I like that quality. This movie right here doesn't fit like some of the other ones. Like we've already said, that in some sequels we see the mummy just kill people who are indiscriminately doing it becomes more of a almost a slasher film in some of the later sequels, whereas this one is very nuanced because the only time that Ardith Bay kills anyone is when they try to destroy the scroll that he needs.
Or they get in his way of doing what he's trying, what his goal is. They get in the way of his goal. But a lot of times, like in other films, mummy films, like somebody else is controlling the mummy.
Yes,
And they have an agenda or a vendetta, and they're controlling the mummy. So unlike here, the mummy is the driving force behind what's going on.
yes, I actually really like that. Because what I kept thinking about it when you said that is the Lot 409
Yeah, oh,
segment.
yeah. Tales from the Dark Side.
Tales from the Dark Side. I see.
Yeah.
I can't remember which movie it was from. I just remember.
Yeah. It's like Christian Slater in there. Yeah, that's great, man.
Which is one of my favorites. But
Yeah.
the scroll in that movie is just as important as the scroll in this one, except that in that movie it's used to control the mummy, and whereas this one it's used primarily to try and resurrect Anaxinamen. So the scrolls have a different function, so to speak, which is very interesting. For this film in particular, I have to when we rewatch the other films in the franchise and we discuss those. I'll have to be able to be more critical of how they use the different scrolls in those to bring back the mummy here and there.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that when the flashback sequence it shows the girl dies, like she's a princess and she dies, and he's in love with her, and he wants to bring her back, so he tries to steal the scroll.
Yep.
That would bring her back, and then they catch him stealing the scroll, and they're like, "Oh hell no!" So then they kill him, and then they bury him with the scroll. So that's kind of how the whole thing goes down. That's why
it still seems odd the way you're gonna bury him with the scroll that he stole, but hey, those are just things in the plot that just they're not supposed to make perfect sense. You got why they just didn't burn the scroll. Why are we resurrecting people anyways?
How's the movie going to take place if you don't have the scroll? There's no way to bring this mummy back without it. But maybe like too though, if you think about it, let's throw something at it so like we have a reason for it. They torture this guy even worse to keep him in this mummy's body, and his soul doesn't go into the next life. His soul is kept there until somebody brings him back, and then he's stuck in this mummy's body, and his soul can't go forward. It can't do what Helen's soul does or the princess's soul does. It can't thrive and change, even though the Helen character seems to still be somewhat connected to the past. Even the first time you see her, she just feels they're in Egypt and she's looking at the pyramids and she's like feels connection to the past, but she's eventually able to let it go.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it was really cool is the way that they use everything you mentioned already. You see it in the makeup design that they have for Boris Karloff when he's Ardith Bay. He looks like an almost shriveled up mummy who is slowly getting his facial features back, but it's really slow.
Right. It's a 10-year time difference between the beginning when he's like really mummy and he's kind of getting better, but Boris Karloff does a very interesting job playing this character too. The way that he does it so meticulously and slow, and it's been 10 years. He's been, I guess, recuperating, but it's like I don't know what he's feeding off of. He doesn't ever feed like a vampire would feed, like in the Brendan Fraser Mummy movie, for instance. He starts to feed and he becomes whole. This mummy's not doing that. I think over time he's getting a little bit better, but he's still not looking too good.
Yeah. Well, I was always wondering that when I was rewatching it, if that's part of one of his powers as the priest with these magical powers that he can exert control over people and like he does in this film.
Yeah.
Where he causes what's his character's name's father to die.
Yeah, so it's like
Wimple,
yeah.
Wimple, yeah. Wimple's father to die as he was trying to burn the scroll.
Right.
And the thing is, and this is funny when I was rewatching it. The thing about this movie is they're so easy to believe that they're the mummy. This is all part of the mummy's curse, and the mummy is after Helen. I made note of that when I was rewatching it. I didn't realize how fast it was. It wasn't any convincing. There was one moment where Helen gets saved by the younger Wimple because she's gone to the museum door. She passes out. He helps her, and he helps her into her house. And the next thing you know, they're all believing that Ardith Bay has something to do with it because he's ominous.
Yeah.
There's like no convincing whatsoever. He's the bad, and that's part of the reason is like I guess there's a huge chunk of this movie just takes place within like a day or two, and then there's these time chunks that happen that are I can't always tell the time difference between the segments, but like you said, the first one between the first time the mummy leaves and when it cuts to the next scene where they're in London, it's 10 years. Because
Yeah, it tells you like because what happens is in the film there's a sign up on the outside of it. It says 19, I think it's 21 or something. And then like the next time it's like the same sign, but it's like 32 or something. But um what's like I think it's the way the characters are done there too, because in that this is part of it because these characters have set with this thing for quite some time. Some of them have like 10 years. Like the character played by Edward Van Salone, Dr. Mueller, who played Van Helsing and Dracula. So he plays a very similar character here.
yeah,
Um, a little different, a little subtler. He's actually like a little more active and a little more lively here. He's
oh yeah,
but he tries to convince the father was the Joseph Wimple. He tries to convince him earlier on. He's like, which is kind of like random. He's like, let's go outside and sit out in the
yeah.
stars under the Egyptian stars and talk about this. While this other guy reads the scroll in there and brings the mummy to life. But they go out there and he tries to talk him out of it. He's like, look, man. He's like, we just got to put this thing back in the ground and not have to worry about it anymore, you know. And so but he was really knowing he was really feeling that something was going on, and this the idea behind this was from that King Tut's tomb and the curse of King Tut's tomb
Yeah.
from when they in 1922 when they uncovered that. But he was just like he tries to talk some sense into the guy, but that guy the whole time, the Dr. Mueller, the whole time he's a conspiracy theorist in a way who turns out to be right. But the whole time he's thinks that something bad's going on, and it's been 10 years later, and he's still
Still
convinced
thinking.
bad's going on. And he's like, and he actually confronts the mummy at one point, and he confirms it, you know, because the whole time he's like he knows. I mean, he's just ready for it, you know. He's ready for this mummy to show up, and
It's like he's been waiting for it.
yeah,
He's wholeheartedly believes in it, and he's been waiting for it. And then when it finally does happen, it's like, oh yeah, I see. I told you almost. I
yeah.
don't.
But then, yeah. And then the guy comes up, and I mean the son, played by David Manners, who played Jonathan Harker in the Dracula film, which is another connection. But he's the one that believes really quickly. But there's some really weird things that happen in this film that are connected in a way that if you're not like, I mean, if you're looking at it and you're not thinking right with this, which I have at some points, like the guy, like for instance, like this, he meets the girl, like David Manners' character Frank, the younger version, the younger Wimple character. He meets her and he immediately falls in love with her, in an odd way. And he plays his character a lot differently than Harker because he's just like all falling over he's falling in love with her immediately, and he's like all up in her face, like 2 inches away from her face, doing this like monologue dialogue, but in an odd way. But at the same time, it's like and that makes her it gives her this hook. But then why does he fall in love with her immediately? And there's something strong pull here that's out. It is a supernatural pull. It's not just regular love. This is not just like you just met this girl and fell in love with her. There's a supernatural pull from this reincarnated soul thing and also the mummy thing. So that's the only way to explain that without thinking, what's up with this? You know? How could he fall in love with her that fast? And and he hardly even knows her. He just sees her and falls in love with her.
Yes, and he declares it really fast too. I
Yeah,
also does that, and when I'm sure when I watched this, I was in college. So that was 25 years ago. Oh my God. 25 years ago when I first saw it. I don't remember exactly, but at least 25 years ago when I first saw the movie, before exploring other Boris Karloff movies. You watch this movie without completely understanding everything, and a lot of the stuff becomes a little hokey to a modern day audience because you have these characters who declare their love so easily, and
Yeah.
of course, it's one of those things where they're trying to create this little love triangle between Ardith Bay, who loves her, and then of course the younger Wimple, who also loves her, and who's going to fight hard enough for that love. And
Right.
it's one of those things where you think that that's all in there because that's what audiences dictated back then. So it was easy for the characters.
But there's two things about it that even though that might be the case, it probably is the case. They probably wanted that for the audience, but there's things about it that really bring it work in a way. There one thing that helps it, they describe it in the next scene. The two older guys talk about it, and they're like his pool, the mummy's pool is even affecting, like, his son. But then it also works for the later part of the film, like when the Helen character has to either choose Ardith Bay
Mm-hmm.
or normal life. She's like, I'm still alive. I can still choose. Like there are other souls out there other than this soul who's corrupted. He's actually, like, over time his soul, there was love there maybe originally, but his has become corrupted and hers is still free. And then this connection with this new guy, this new possible other love interest, that does, like, help her decision later on, which is pretty progressive for this film, for her character, because he is not the hero of the film. She is. That, the Helen character is
Yeah.
she's the one that ends up, and really more so between her and the soul of the princess, between those two characters, which are kind of not even really the same character, because they kind of switch between them, but those are those are the protagonists. This other guy's just kind of there to help, to
Mm.
help a little bit, which his help, it does help that he's there. It helps her connect with the present day time, because that's like the first time you see her, she's really connected with the Egypt, and she's like, this is dreadful, this new Egypt of 1932. And she, like, looks at the pyramids, that's the ancient Egypt, which she connects with, and then she looks to the city and she's like, this is dreadful. But by the end of it, she picks the city over the pyramids.
It's an interesting observation. I didn't even think about that myself when I was watching it. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Huh. Yeah. Yeah. See, so when I rewatch it, I have to think about it that way.
Right, right. I mean, that's the thing about this one, and it's kind of, because you're looking at me watching it the first time, probably the second time, you want to see some mummy kill somebody. There's also a very good Hammer series of mummy movies.
Mhm.
They started out, and then really the first Hammer, like, mummy movie is kind of like the sequel to this. They didn't start off with all this. There's a little bit of this in it. Christopher Lee plays the mummy in that one. There's a little bit of flashback where you see it, but it's kind of a combination between this one and the second one. Even the Brandon Fraser mummy movie does what happens in this film a little bit, but then they kind of combine the stories of the other mummy movies into this. Ardith Bay, that's an acronym for Death by Ra, who's the sun guy.
Yeah, someone had to tell me that. I never realized that.
Yeah, but there's also a character in the Brendan Fraser movie called Ardith Bay. He's the guy with the black hair. He's kind of like, he's protecting the mummy's tombs. He's in the first two mummy movies, and his name's Ardith Bay. But it's
Hmm.
kind of he kind of picks that name, Death by Ra. He picks it as an acronym, like the mummy, who's, I guess, Imhotep's his Egyptian mummy name, and that wasn't going to fly in 1932. Ardith Bay sounds much more natural.
The Imhotep, yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing I like, and forgive me, I'm not sure, yeah, how much of this film you absolutely like, or what elements of this film you like, as opposed to those that you don't like. But for me, I like the fact that we get a lot of great shots in this of Boris Karloff. They utilize that close up on him when he's doing something nefarious, whether he's in the museum sequences where he's reading from the scroll, or when he's at his his domicile where he's conjuring up these I don't know what spells that work on other people.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got some spells. He can do some stuff, He's kind of it's one of his powers. He can do stuff. He doesn't have to be there. He can do it from like
yeah. That's the cool thing about this, because he could see things through his. They don't really show what it is. This pool of whatever he's looking into all the time. That he's being able to see what other people are doing. It's just a visual thing on him. But I always imagine that he's looking at the pool, he's seeing what other people are doing, doesn't matter where, and he's exerting his control over elements in there. Like when he makes the elder Wimple have a heart attack and / die, and then when he makes the younger Wimple pass out right before he abducts Helen.
Right.
Stuff like that, I think is really cool. That I don't really see too much in any of the other. I don't remember seeing any of that in the other films.
Well, yeah. I mean, this mummy's got like different powers. Like I was saying, the other films are completely different. They're usually the mummy's being controlled by somebody else, and it's not doing it. But what's interesting about this was not necessarily interesting, but what happened. Here's how it went down. So the original idea was based on a character called Cagliostro. I think that's how you pronounce it, Cagliostro.
Yeah.
But he was a magician. He was based on a real person who was but the idea was a magician who was immortal. And so when they were trying to develop this, they didn't have a story. Like they didn't have like a book. They didn't have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Or they didn't have Bram Stoker's Dracula. And they're like, but they really, that's the thing about the Mummy compared to the other ones. Like this is based on the King Tut's going into King Tut's tomb. So unlike Dracula or Frankenstein, there's a basis on something that really happened. But then they're like, what if the mummy was immortal? And the idea was like they took the story of this magician who was immortal, which that's why he has magician powers, like you're talking about. But that was kind of like how they started. That wasn't how it ended up going, but that was kind of like the basics. They're like, why don't we take Dracula, mix it with this magician, and then add them, make it the mummy, and people at the time, I think, were really fascinated with the whole Egyptian mummy stuff because that opened up King Tut's tomb, just opened their imaginations to the possibility of this Egyptian life, and there's a lot of cool things in there, and all those statues and all that.
Mm-hmm. No. I remember reading about that at some point. I did papers on this so long ago, but now I've forgotten a lot because I did this in college. In college I did a paper on Boris Karloff and James Wells and George Romero, some of the hardcore I loved back then, and which is the only reason why I have an appreciation for these movies now, is like I've saw them in college, which helped me look at these films in a different light. One of the great things about this program is I'm hoping that for all those horror fans out there who have never seen this movie because they turned away from black and white films, I want them to kind of take a second look at the possibilities out there. And almost every film that Boris Karloff ever did was in black and white. It wasn't until his later years that he did color films, and even then those films are not some of his best.
Most of his good films were black and white. It's now there might be, other than it being black and white, there might be a pacing issue here for some people. Like that you mentioned before, which I really like that film, The Old Dark House. I think the pacing on that one is really good. Here, and this is a pre-code movie like The Old Dark House, because they were trying to appease the censors, but they did get some stuff in here that they wouldn't have been able to do like 4 or 5 years later. But this like at the end, she's all in that skimpy outfit, like when they're about to. Yeah. They would not have been able to do that 2 years after this. But the Old Dark House, especially, there's some very, very, very much some pre-code stuff in there. Like the guy I think he tries to rape one of the girls and stuff like that nature, which would not have flown like in 1935.
Yeah, I forgotten about that. You're absolutely right. I forgot about that. That definitely probably had a huge effect on the films that came after Pre-Code, and whichever ones that Universal did after this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff in this one and some of the other Pre-Code Universal monster movies. I always forget which year some of the sequels came.
Yeah. So really, like this is kind of about it though. This is one of the first one was Dracula. Well, there's all the silent ones before that. The first big one was Dracula, and then Frankenstein, and then this one, and then after that, it became the codes started really punching in. Like I guess the Invisible Man was 33. By the time they did Bride of Frankenstein, they were really the code was probably all up their ass at that point. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
But they actually, yeah, they cut out some stuff of Bride of Frankenstein, which is probably one of the better ones of the bunch.
Oh yeah. Oh
I,
yeah.
I would like to see the Bride. That'd be cool if they were able to keep some of that footage that was lost and put it back in there. You know, I bet it was pretty awesome. Yeah,
Well, unfortunately, when this movie was in all these earlier movies were made, I'm pretty sure most of the cut footage was destroyed,
yeah,
or they didn't
sure.
have the proper means to safeguard it like
Yeah,
we do now, which is a shame. That's why so many movies before the 30s were actually have been a lot of a lot of movies, which is a shame. Which is why we have to keep talking about these movies, is because we don't want them to be lost. We don't want them to be forgotten. We want people to kind of revisit them from time to time. And the Mummy, not just because it's a Universal monster film, and it's an icon of Universal monsters everywhere. People are familiar with them. This monster, as well as Dracula and the rest of them that Universal Studios created back then, whether they've seen the movie or not. And so that's and it's not just it's a black and white movie, but the age does hinder people from watching it.
yeah, yeah. They've done good to preserve these films, these Universal monster films, especially the older the main like what
The
five or
main
six
ones.
of them. Yeah, but I mean they've done a lot of work to preserve them over the years. They keep doing more work to them, but they still look pretty good for the year that they are. They look a lot better than like sometimes if you see a movie that wasn't preserved in the 50s or 60s or even the 70s, it might not look as good as what they've been able to keep up with these. They put a lot of a lot of people still like them. You know, they still like love these films, and so they just they know they're going to be able to keep pushing them out there.
Well, which is one of the things we've talked about before. If for everyone out there who may not be familiar with this, but if you can, these all the main Universal monster films have all been reproduced in 4K, and I know Dave here has watched a lot of these in 4K. He can tell us exactly how pristine and how great they look compared to the versions that I may have watched.
Well, yeah, they probably. I mean, like I say, they take good care of these films, but they do, especially Dracula. I think that one more than any of the other ones. They did a lot of work on the 4K transfer. This one it looks good though in 4K. I think the Blu-ray looks pretty fantastic too, though. Really, I think they probably they may have done the work before the 4K transfer because the Blu-ray already looks good to begin with.
So you have no reason not to go seek this movie out. Uh, we're going to not delve too much into any of the sequels for this. We're going to hope to get to those one day soon, as that is one of the mandates that I want to do on the show, is get to some of the sequels to some of these films as we go through the year. But I did want to kind of go over, because I'm not sure. I'm assuming you've seen some of Karloff's films beforehand, but we've never actually had a discussion about whether or not you're a fan of these type of films, this era of filmmaking.
Yeah.
We've discussed only the ones from the Universal monsters because we've been picking through those, but I want to get a little insight on how much of a fan, if you are a fan
Yeah.
of Boris Karloff or any of the other great actors in this film.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a fan of Boris Karloff for sure, and Bela Lugosi from Dracula. But this, as far as the other, I mean, even the supporting cast though, they're good in this, you know. But but Karloff for sure, I like when you have they did some films where they have both Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi in them, like The Black Cat and that one we talked about earlier, The Body Snatcher.
Nice Snatcher.
Yeah, that was. Yeah, that it wasn't that their last on screen like they were kind of like almost like I guess frenemies or something. They're basically competing after a while. Bela Lugosi got really screwed really when it but he
Yeah.
was he played that Igor character in the Son of Frankenstein where Boris Karloff and him were both in it.
Hmm.
That was really great though when he played Igor and when he did that. And it was a very interesting story behind the way that he wasn't even really supposed to be in the film, but then they kept adding more scenes for him for that.
And that's the thing about trying to resurrect these older films for modern day audiences. Unfortunately, both Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff careers went really far down. Especially Bela Lugosi, his was kind of documented a little bit in the Tim Burton's Ed Wood film, of which you got to see a little bit of Martin Landau, who played them brilliantly in there.
Yeah. You won a best I think it was supporting actor for that.
I
He's
think
up
so too.
against he was up against Samuel L. Jackson for Pulp Fiction, man. That was a tough one.
But he had it rough before he passed away. But Boris Karloff was relegated to Z grade movies for most of the last. He worked up until he died, pretty much. But thankfully, his last great movie was Targets, which I think was a brilliant movie and a great movie to end his career with. Despite the fact there was a couple after that that kind of
Did you say Targets? Is that what you said?
Targets. Have you
Okay.
ever seen that one?
I hadn't seen it. No, no, I haven't seen
Oh, great movie, great
it.
movie. It utilizes some of the scenes from The Terror, and
Yeah, yeah,
and also, yeah, it was a great way to utilize old footage, but create a new story with with Boris Karloff as a character. It's really real. I only saw it a couple of years ago, finally, because
I hadn't seen that. Yeah, Terror is interesting. Starring Jack Nicholson in that one.
that's a
Um,
guilty pleasure. I have a
yeah,
really good Blu-ray copy of that one,
yeah, I
actually.
haven't seen it in a long time. But Boris Karloff, even though he was still like even then when he was older like that and doing those, he still did a good job in some of those. I saw one. I can't remember the name of it, but he was pretty old, but you could tell he's having a tough time even
Mhm.
standing. They got him to. They got him to come out and do a night scene in one scene. They're watching behind the scenes and they're like had to talk him into doing this exterior night scene. So it was like a big ordeal.
What I've always admired about Boris Karloff is that he always brought 120% to every film, no matter how bad the film actually ended up being.
Yeah,
So watching him, for me, is like watching Peter Cushing. Peter Cushing is another actor I believe
right.
gave 125% in every film, no matter how good or bad it was. And so it's so much fun watching these two characters in any role they're in any film. Film may be god awful, but it's great watching these actors in those films.
Yeah,
This film, thankfully, is at the earlier part of Boris Karloff's career, where he's doing all these great roles, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And so you're getting that in his characterization of Arliss Bay in this film, and even what he brings to life in the Frankenstein films, and then all the other films he was doing around the same time. I mean, this guy was a force to be reckoned with, in my opinion, in the 30s and 40s. He was just hitting them out of the park.
yeah. And then what was it? What was cool though? He did Frankenstein, where the Frankenstein doesn't hardly talk. And so this was like a big jump from that to okay, this guy can talk. Yeah, we already knew he could look cool on camera. That's the thing about Boris Karloff is his face looks cool.
Mhm.
It looks like he's just putting this mummy makeup and the Frankenstein makeup on him. He looks like that. He's had that perfect type of face for that type of character. And I
Mhm.
think that's what really sold a lot of it.
Mhm.
And it was like kind of maybe pigeonholed him a little bit, but but at the same time he just had the right face for that makeup.
Oh yeah, of course it pigeonholed him. That's unfortunate. That's the same thing that happened to Bela Lugosi, among other actors. Of Carradine, was it John Carradine? And I'm trying to think of all the other great horror actors from that time period whose all careers were pigeonholed, because that's unfortunate what happened in the Hollywood studio systems way back then. you do one type of film and that's all you end up doing. I mean, I can't even fathom how many mad doctors Boris Karloff has played in his career.
Right.
Probably more bad doctors than every other actor combined. He played so many bad doctors.
It's cool though. Yeah, it's cool though if you're not used to seeing him talk that much, especially when you see him. Was it House of Frankenstein? I think that's the one where he plays the doctor that's got a lot of dialogue. You know, it's like the really crazy one. But it's cool. To me, like the seeing him, the Body Snatcher to me is the one that I thought was his like the time when I saw him. Like, okay, that guy can really act, and just like I think even in the Black Cat, in comparison, I like Bela Lugosi's presence, but when you see him acting opposite of him, you can like that guy there has really got something going. But of course, it may have been just the character that he was playing because you got Bela Lugosi having played the kind of the straighter character, and he's playing the crazy one, so it made it a little more fun to play, you know.
No, I agree with you on that one. Black Cat's very fun to watch. And hopefully we'll get to that one day. I'm trying to think of anything else we want to talk or discuss about the Mummy, and I can't think of anything else because we kind of jumped around on this one a lot.
Yeah, and I guess they bring it. Yeah, it's really the it. I mean, I guess with the Mummy, it is just. It's not what you expect it to be. If you're used to
No,
seeing the Mummy from the other Mummy films, this one's gonna, and that's why I think the second time I saw it, I didn't like it because I was expecting something different. But what you get here is fairly thought provoking, a lot more than you, especially with the reincarnation difference between the reincarnated soul and the soul that has been trapped in a body for like 3,700 years. So it's like it's been the body's decayed and the soul's decayed. So they're both like and she's she's kind of partially drawn to it briefly, and he also kills her dog. That's really crazy that he kills her dog, by the way.
oh yeah, I forgot about that.
It's like she goes and brings the dog in there, and it's like it comes back, and it's like, what happened to the dog? Oh, the dog is dead. But yeah, I mean, it's like that's that sort of thing. It's like, okay, you can have a dog now and walk around with a dog, but now if you go into this past, they're going to kill your dog. So it's like you got to go forward. You can't like go back to the ancient Egyptians anymore. You got to go forward, and living in this decayed, mummified body, that it would just it's just going to be miserable. He's definitely not happy. He thinks getting another mummy, kind of like I guess the Bride of Frankenstein, getting a bride, is going to make him happy, but it wouldn't have. I can almost guarantee it. We don't get to see it, but I doubt it would have worked. So, would have made them both unhappy.
Two unhappy people in love. Uh,
I don't even. I mean, the souls weren't compatible anymore. And that's an interesting thing. I mean, it just has that idea of that idea is there though. It's a really thought provoking idea about the souls and over time separating. I don't know, but that's cool though.
Yeah. Well, each time you rewatch this film, you see a different aspect that adds to your enjoyment and or the story of the film. Because this isn't simply a someone is using the mummy as a means for revenge. I think that's what makes this film much more memorable than some of the other films in the franchise. Because unfortunately, after the second film, they got into a formula and it kind of repeats
Yeah,
repeats after that. And without Bella Boris Karloff, it loses some of that great ambiance and that character because you have to rely on different people playing the title role. So um, with that, I want to thank you for discussing the Mummy 1932 with me, Dave. But what we do for everyone out there listening to the podcast, what we do is we kind of do a rating system for the film. We like to rate it 1 to 5 star, 1 star being very bad, the 5 stars being very good. And Dave, where on your spectrum would you put this film? The Mummy from 1932.
So I'm gonna land it at a 4. It may be a little generous, but I just have to consider what it when it happened, when it was made, and what came after it. It is an inspiration for anything that came after that, as far as other mummy films. So we kind of started it, and just the resurrection and the reincarnation subplot, or not really subplot, that's the driving force of the plot, and I like the progressiveness of the Helen character, being the hero, and her, and kind of fighting this other the princess. Between those, even they both kind of make the decision together, with the help of some Egyptian god, to go forward instead of going back.
So for me, I'm going to do it at 4 as well, mostly because I'm a huge Boris Karloff fan, but also because the film is much different than some of the other films we mentioned for the Universal Monster movies. But we also mentioned one of the key aspects is this was them trying to come up with a new story that wasn't directly based on literary work. So a lot of this was being pulled from multiple different areas. The King Tut's tomb, not to mention what people were really into at the time, which was Egypt and the fabled curses that surrounded King Tut's tomb and so on. I think with this one and say Creature from Black Lagoon, they're two of the films where the monsters were so different, not based on anything prior to. I think Bram Stoker's One Story by the Mummy is about the closest I could think of that was out before then. But
Right.
the Mummy, a Mummy slash the Mummy was not really like in our consciousness as a monster movie, and they did something really creative with it for this first film. But then after that, it kind of devolved into someone's controlling a mummy type of movie. That being said, I think that's what puts this film on a higher pedestal than some of the other Universal Monster movies, and that's one of those films I believe that I would definitely recommend to everybody who loves these type of movies and or wants a good, solid mummy movie. And there's not many of those out there, audience members. There's not really that many great mummy movies out there. There's really few of them.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, even if there are some bad ones, some of the Mummy movies can be pretty entertaining. Hammer did, like, I think 4 of them, and
Yeah, they did 4 of them.
Brendan Fraser ones are a lot of fun. They're not hard like you expect, but I guess we should mention the Tom Cruise one, which kind of didn't do as good as it should have.
uh, no, I will say that between the Brendan Fraser remake and of course the Tom Cruise remake, they're all stealing from the original idea that was put in here. Those are all Universal Pictures remakes of this original film.
Yeah.
They pull ideals from this one and kind of craft their own thing from it. And like you said, the Brendan Fraser one does borrow from some of the other films to make it more interesting. The elements that they thought would work better, like Brendan Fraser's movie, if they just stuck with the Mummy in the very beginning, and then and that was it. He's trying to, they had to add a lot more elements to it.
They basically they kind of started out like this one, and then they changed it to the second Mummy movie. They're making another Mummy movie too. I was reading about it earlier.
They're never gonna stop. Mummy is the most popular character in Universal Monsters' little filmography, and it's like, really, because he's the one that's just a guy wrapped up in bandages that walks really slow. In theory, with each new version, they kind of do something different with him or her.
Sometimes they do something different. Sometimes they just do the same movie again, like in the last of these Mummy movies. Or like, we're just going to do the same thing again. Except we're going to in New Orleans this time for some reason.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. So I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation about the Mummy with me and Dave Watkins. You can catch new episodes of our show every Wednesday at 8 a.m. We also have sometimes special episodes that we release on Mondays at 8 a.m. Make sure to check out the podcast on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, YouTube, or direct by Libsyn. Also, check out our sister podcast, Conversations in 4Color, which delves deep into comic books, manga, and graphic novels. From everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we want to wish you a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.